Have you ever had a dream? Something you really felt you needed to do? This is it for me. Today we are taking a look at the culmination of a few months of work, a playmat, a bunch of cards, weapons, and a bunch of different sick interactions for you guys. It's my game Blackblade. What is Blackblade? Blackblade is a tactical card game where the players have to defeat each other in this 2D, not 2D, this 5x2 grid, which somewhat flows a little bit like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon mixed, but is completely different once you get the hang of it. So Blackblade is a dark fantasy series at its core. There's a bunch of different characters. There's 12 regions. 12 regions because there is 12 Zodiac, 12 Disciples, and of course 12 Phantom Troop members. We don't count Crollo, and of course there's always a betrayer in the group. Keep that in mind when you're following the lore of Blackblade and the 12 kingdoms. That might come in handy. But other than that, that's what Blackblade is. And the magic system in Blackblade, to sum it up really quickly, is predicated on color. Yes, I got really tired of elemental magic systems, so I decided to create a magic system that was primarily predicated on using colors of the people's auras as their ability. So in the world of Blackblade, for example, you can see this character here, Cassius. He's using an ability, and that ability he's exuding is Veil. It's called Veil because you use crown energy. There's three main pieces of energy channels, but most people in the world revere the crown energy. There's crown, heart, and gut energy. So crown energy, it's a veil, so veil energy comes out, and the veil energy he's using is blue. He happens to be a blue song as well. What a blue song is that the song of your soul is blue. So the color of your soul is blue, and that's what gives you blue veil. Some people might have a red soul, making them a red song, but they use blue veil, making them a blue blade. So all of the fighters who use blue veil, are blue blades, and that's where we get the name Blackblade. It's obviously the users of veil energy who use black veil energy to fight with. Those are called Blackblades in the world of Blackblade. I hope I've broken that down in a manner that is efficient and makes a lot of sense. Without further ado, let's actually get into the objective of the game. So how Blackblade functions in its trading card game format is that there are two main commander cards. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to clear up the boards as quickly as I can. Let me just get these guys off. Okay, and then let's open the game mat here. Get these guys off. All right, also the health potion, claymore. Okay, so essentially what we usually start with is we would start with two commanders or general cards. How you can tell they are commander or general cards is that they have a crown here in the top left corner of the card. They also have some writing above them. This writing does not symbolize a commander or a general, but it is the type of magic or at least veil energy that they use. So Aster is a luck or fortune type, which is a very special type, and you can see King Isserin is a resonance type. So just a little bit of background, the reason why there's a clash between Aster and he's the exiled prince and this is King Isserin is not because Isserin is Aster's father. Aster's father is Solon Severian, who passed away after a fight with the Dread Saints, i.e. Atreus. You can actually check that out in one of my other videos. It breaks down that lore. But after that, King Isserin manages to slowly unravel the political structure of the Azure Rock, which is the capital of Azure Light. As you can see, he's the king of Azure Light. he manages to slowly unravel all of Aster's political ties, because Aster's obviously a child growing up, and he manages to use his power and sway that he has from Mistmere, his stronghold, which is one of the 3 main towns or capitals that you'll find in the country of Azurite. So there's Mistmere, there is Celeste Bridge, and there's the Azure Rock. The Azure Rock is the capital, of course, which King Isurin now sits at the top of as the main leader of Azurite. He has sent a few people after Aster, some as a wild goose chase and some on a very serious hunt to catch this character. So basically the game ends in Blackblade. Just to get off of the lore, the game ends when you can defeat an enemy general or you kill 5 enemy units. Alright, so if Aster or King Isurin dies, then the game is over. Or if 5 of the units they manage to deploy to the board die, the game is over. They are currently not on the field. This is the field. You see the front row and back row, and you can see the front row and back row there. That's the field. That's the active cards. These cards are not in active play, but we can use them to deploy units and take a few other actions. Okay, now that we've got the game objective out of the way, I think a good place to carry on with this is to talk about how we construct decks in Blackblade. So basically you're going to have 7, you're going to have a deck of 7. I shouldn't even call it a deck. You're going to have a hand of 7. Now I'm still deciding whether this hand needs to be blind. It will most probably be a blind hand that your opponent can't see, just for a little bit of surprise factor in the game. But you will essentially at the beginning of the game have already chosen a team of 7 that you are bringing into the fight, which is going to accompany your general. So in total it's around 8 cards that are going to be occupying your field at most. We don't want any more chaos on such a small cramped up board. So that's what that has to do with. So when the turn starts in Blackblade, you'll see there's a bunch of stats. Let's go over the stats, then we'll go over how the turns work. So we have Aster the Exiled Prince. We have speed 50, health 1100, damage 400, which is physical, and armor, he is wearing leather armor. We can see something similar on Isurin. He's got 45 speed, he's got 2300 health, he's got 400 damage, and he is wearing chainmail. Okay, so the first thing you can do on a turn, or rather, because of the speed stats, the first thing I'd like to discuss, because of the differential in speed, one card obviously having a higher speed stat than the other, i.e. Aster is faster than King Isurin, Aster gets to move first, and this will remain the same for as long as his speed is the highest. Turn order is dictated by speed in Blackblade, so it is a very important stat. The faster a card is, the higher initiative it has in a turn. So it gets to set up and do things. And there's cards which are made specifically to have high speed stats so they can set up problems for your opponent before your opponent gets to actually respond or react. So think cards that set traps on the board, and then you want to maybe deploy certain cards into a certain zone, and a card outspeeds you and it lays a trap where you want to deploy, and all of a sudden you have to take free damage. So think in those lines. Okay, so what Aster can do turn 1, there's a couple of actions he can take, but usually cards can only take 1 action per turn. So there is a movement action, a deploy action, and a self-deploy action for the generals. Generals can deploy themselves onto the field in their turn, or I should call them commanders. we kind of moving away from calling them general, because general sounds like a general unit, like an overall unit, whereas I want it to sound like the commander. So we might use commander as the language, but for now in Blackblade we've got a general or a commander card. So what it can do is it can self-deploy, or it can deploy a unit. This is the most rational action to take on turn 1, and you'll deploy a card like Saurian, the Lion of Mistmere, to the field. Then your opponent, King Isserin, can do the same thing. So he can deploy Kest, the Burnt Vow. So you can see, and then the turns end. Then we look at speed overall. So we see 40 speed, making Saurian the slowest. Kest is currently the fastest with 53 speed. Asta would follow, and then Isserin. So Kest has a bunch of different options. We're just going to flip the card around. Usually the game would look the way I had it laid out, but just for the sake of simplicity in this tutorial, let's look at what Kest can do. He's got a bunch of options here. He can deal flat magic damage of 300 to Saurian, or what he can do is he can use abilities. So let's read over his abilities. His first ability is a passive. It says Kest is Veil Burned. Veil Burn deals 20% damage instead of 15% to enemy units. Enemy units have their active cooldowns increased by 1 when they suffer Veil Burn. Alright, so Veil Burn is a keyword, the first status condition of the game that you guys are being introduced to. So there's other status conditions like bleeding, poison, charmed, sleep, dazed, veil rot. I might be missing one, taunted. So those are some other status conditions that you would find in the world of Blackblade. And Veil Burn is a very interesting one, which makes you take 15% damage every time you use an ability or a passive casts. So there's some characters which have very active passive abilities which go off quite a few times, and they will get punished quite badly by this, but it's only if the passive actually goes off. So we're going to have to do some writing on what is an active passive versus a passive passive, if that makes sense. His second ability is called Mirren's Touch. I'll explain who the Mirrens are at some point, but we can just move on from that. It applies Veil Burn and it deals 300 magic damage to a target enemy. If the enemy is already Veil Burned or currently has more health than Kest, deal 400 instead. So this character will absolutely light up any card that is right in front of it. That is the purpose of Kest. He stays in the battle. He's like a bruiser kind of character. You put him there in the front line and he keeps wailing on with damage. Notice his main ability, Mirren's Touch, only has a 2-turn cooldown. So this is going to be dealing 450 very often. If you can see Asta's stat line, this means that this card could potentially murk Asta in 3 turns. If Asta remains in the front line, pretty easily going to sweep Asta. Okay, so what Kest can do, we were still discussing the actions. So actions he can take, he can change his weapon. That's one action he is allowed to take. He can also use an item. That's another action. Or he can perform a movement command. How the movements work in Blackblade is you can go to any adjacent square. So you can hop into any one of these squares diagonally or side to side, and it's all legal so long as you are here. You cannot jump over to the other side like this. If you're on this side of the board, you have limited options. So keep that in mind. Anything on these kinds of squares will have limited movement options. You may travel through units if you have extra movement, but you may not travel through a unit if you are moving normally, because you cannot travel on top of your own unit like that. So keep that in mind when you are playing the game. Alright, so basically we have Kest here, and let's say he chooses to attack. So I just want to show, for the sake of simplicity, that he would be able to attack this card, and this card, because he is a melee attacker. So he'd be able to attack a card if it was here on the left of Saurian as well. He can attack Naeem as well. But he decides to attack Saurian, and Saurian suffers 300 damage. Except that's not true, because magic types take 1.25x the damage, or at least types which wear plate, sorry, not magic types. Plate receives 1.25 extra damage from magic damage sources. So armor types are very important in Blackblade, because you can suffer a whole lot more damage based on the armor type. So this magic attack, which initially dealt 300, is actually going to end up dealing 375 damage to Saurian, the Lion of Mistmere, leaving him with 1925 health after that interaction. Let's just remove Naeem. We were still going over turn order. It would then be something like Aster's turn. Maybe Aster doesn't feel like going on the board yet, so Aster could summon Naeem at this point, deploy her to the board, and then Issarin would have his turn. Issarin would be able to deploy another unit to the board. Maybe let's get Varen involved. So Varen, and then finally Saurian would conclude the turn with his very slow 40 speed, and he'd be able to deal 350 physical damage to either Varen, who has just been summoned, or Kest. Note, when a card is deployed, it is not allowed to act that same turn. So if something is deployed to the field, it cannot act on that same turn. The fact that it has shown up is its action. Okay, so that's some of the interesting stuff. I just want to show hit range. So in terms of hit range, right, most cards will just hit the adjacent squares around them. That makes a lot of sense. The melee attackers. If an ability says it does physical damage, it can only hit one square across. So Kest, if he had a spell that hit for physical damage, it can only hit boom, boom, boom. Whereas magic damage spells hit 2 forward in a diamond, and they can hit anything. So they can hit boom, boom, or they can hit boom, boom, or they can hit boom, boom, or they can hit boom. Sometimes you want to target your own unit, so keep that in mind. But magic abilities can hit a unit chilling in the back row. Just for the sake of simplicity, so you can see what I'm talking about, let's get Cassius onto the board. Okay, Cassius is on the board. So Mirren's Touch, this absolute nuke of an ability, it deals 300 magic damage, and it is a magic ability because it deals magic damage. Therefore, it will be able to hit Cassius even though he is blocked by a front row unit. Now let's discuss this. If Kest wants to normal attack with this, even though this is magic, this is still a normal attack. This would be blocked by Saurian, so he wouldn't be able to target Cassius at the back. Now, if Saurian is not there right in front of him, let's make another example here. Let's just show. If Saurian is not in front of Cassius, and this is the current board state, then yes, Kest can use what is called as a charge attack, and it's just called that to differentiate it from a normal attack, just so people understand that the card is charging over the front row, and it can hit a back row unit. So Kest from this position would be able to hit Cassius with a normal attack, but if there is a front row blocker, he will not be able to do that. He will have to attack the front row blocker. You do have other cards which have range. Let's bring one onto the board. Actually, let's see if we can find Gale somewhere in my list of cards. Just have to figure out where she is. Okay, cool. Alright, so we have Gale Whisper, whose name I changed because, bro. But she's already part of the lore, so maybe not. Maybe Gale Whisper is just the way we're gonna do it. But Gale is another commander card, so technically she's not supposed to be here while Asta's here. But her game plan, unlike Asta, is that she wants to, well, very similar to a lot of the generals, especially the generals in the blue region. She wants to chill in the back row and not receive damage, but she is way more active in terms of dealing damage and can do quite a lot based on her abilities. So she has a ability that deals 300 damage to up to 3 enemy units, which is bonkers. It is a 900 damage swing, and it is a very high damage swing once it hits you. And she can also instantly swap positions with another character on the field, making her pretty hard and elusive to track down and get a hit on. But the reason why Gale is here is that she can do what the melee characters cannot, which is she uses ranged weapons to fight with. Alright, so because she uses ranged weapons, she can use either a blue or a red bow or ranged weapon. There will be crossbows as well, so I just want to say ranged weapons. And what she can do that maybe another card can't is that if there was a card like Serena chilling here, Serena Nocturna, she has 2 range. Most range weapons will have 2. I do think some will have 3 to be absolutely devastating. But what she can do is hit 1, 2, and hit Serena from here. Saurian would not be able to hit Serena from any one of these 2 positions, whereas Gale would be able to hit this card from here. So that's one aspect of what makes Gale pretty strong, or at least ranged units pretty strong, and why you probably want to have them in the back. They can also set up like this and still hit back row units from the back row, whereas if it is not ranged, it has to be in the front row to use a charge attack and hit a back row unit, whereas she can very comfortably hit a back row unit. Let's say Serena was on this side. Just have to get her across, guys. Serena Nocturna. Alright, so she can hit Serena Nocturna from this position. So we will work out card ranges and what counts as a square. This would be 1, 2, 3 squares. Range, this would be 1, 2 squares. Maybe we need to create a rule on diagonals where going through a diagonal adds 1 extra square. So this would also be 3 range. We can look at it. The one condition where Gale would not be able to hit Serena Nocturna is from this position, because Varen is quite clearly in the way. Also, I need a way to write the rules. Currently, like I said, I'm still working on it, where cases like this are more clear. Does she actually have a clear shot on Serena Nocturna from this position? So we'll work that out as well in the planning. I'm thinking that this should be a position where she's able to hit. I'm thinking that that is a smarter way to design the game, because certain cards from here would be able to, I guess, get hit. But we'll see. Maybe this card can protect from this position, and maybe if it's not there, then of course it's a very open shot. We'll work on that as we are building. So that's an example of range. I've explained the status conditions. I've explained the somewhat turn structure. So let's get into the last thing I wanted to discuss for this little breakdown of the game. Oh yeah, before we do that, let's just get into items. Alright, so there's items and weapons. So basically we've been speaking a lot about items and weapons, and you guys haven't even heard how they're relevant. So this is a weapon card. There's a weapon and items deck that you can draw cards from, and then you can use them to equip your characters. So we can just pretend that this was equipped to Saurian as he was played. It is a rank 1 weapon. And what Saurian will gain from this is he'll gain 20 damage onto his initial base. So he now does 370 damage and he'll gain 5 speed. So instead of moving last, he is tied for speed with Isserin, and we'll probably have to do a coin flip between them to decide who would go first between him and King Isserin. But you can see just by equipping a weapon how overpowered, quote unquote, a character can get, because adding +5 speed has changed the turn order potentially of this card and has potentially made him, instead of maybe suffering a final blow in the last turn, able to deal the last blow. So weapon cards are very strong with the stats that they add. When you kill an enemy unit, there is a zone for weapons and upgrades where the cards will rank up. So as a reward for killing an enemy unit, this is what's going to make the game aggressive and make people want to play Blackblade in a more aggressive way, where you hunt your enemy's weaker units and you get them off of the board. You're not only hunting the general, because obviously killing the general is the fastest way to win the game, but killing the other units, getting rid of cards like Naeem, which have relatively lower health pools than some of the other cards, will reward you with weapon upgrades. So we can rank up to 3, and the weapon upgrades on the 3rd rank are gonna be bonkers, bro. They are going to enable very aggressive strategies or very win more strategies. It's basically a snowball, so you do not want to get snowballed on. As soon as your opponent kills one of your units using one of their units, you want to get one of their units off of the board or risk potentially getting snowballed on. Then of course, outside of weapons, there's also items. This is the red potion of health, and it simply just heals an ally unit for 150 health, and you can, as I've explained, use an item as one of your actions. So let's say your main abilities are on cooldown and your card's attack stat is bums. What he can do instead of wasting the turn on an attack is he can use an item. You're also allowed to use a pass action where you don't actually do something in your turn. That's another thing a card can do. It can simply just pass over the action, but it will not regain the action. We're not in the business of doing that. Okay, so we're going to look at Asta's main strategy. We're going to look at some of the strategy for the game. So we're going to be looking at abilities and how these cards somewhat function around each other. I thought I should just mention that the unit type looks like this. This just means a regular unit. There's also tokens which have a circle, and there's flying types which are going to have a wing yet. We haven't developed the flying type, but they're going to be more based on movement, and the punishments for having so much mobility and movement and being able to get over cards on the board very easily is obviously going to be their health and possibly their damage, but they're going to be a more useful movement class. Anyway, let's speak on Asta and his game plan. So we can see his abilities, and we've got Fleeting Crown as the first ability. It's a passive. Once per game, ignore the effects of any attack that would bring Asta below 500 health. Instead, leave him at 500 HP and inflict Dazed on the attacker. Dazed is a very powerful status condition where your action has a 25% chance, your next action of a dazed unit, or at least while a unit is dazed, it has a 25% chance to fail actions while it is dazed. So you might want it to do something, to move, to attack, to use an ability, and it could just fail on a 25% chance. A 1 in 4 chance is pretty big and pretty brutal, so you're gonna want to get dazed off of units when they get it. So this is a ability that helps Asta survive, of course, especially when he's very low health. 500 is not a good health for this card to be on. But you can see desperate situation after surviving 5 turns on the field. So not surviving here in this zone and being a coward, being a little chicken on the field. After he survives 4 turns on the field, he transforms into a card called Aster the Azure Prince. And wow, that card will sweep your team. There's nothing like that card in the game right now. It is essentially an Exodia kind of card. We as in me, I'm looking at potentially having to lower Aster's health and maybe adding more survival turns. We'll see once people get into playing the game and we get a lot more data from the game. But from what I could tell from how I was balancing the game, this interaction seemed pretty broken once I finished the rest of the game. So yeah, Aster wants to survive. He also has a very contradictory damage stat. That 400 damage of physical is actually very strong. It's actually a very, very strong attack stat. But you'd never really want him in the front line dealing damage. And that's the only way he'd do it. And of course, he has the disadvantage of not really having any synergies for weapon types. So for example, he uses magic items, you can see. So if you were to give him a sword, it might add stats, but he wouldn't have access to this passive. Now's a good time as ever to just mention that, of course, the color of a weapon is the type of weapon you can use, and the grayed out weapons means that you can use any color. So this means any magic item can be equipped to him and he can make use of it. So very interesting, very contradictory stuff, but it makes sure that he is somewhat punished for his wanting to survive the whole time as a general. So let's look at some of the cards made, literally built to keep him alive. Saurian was once a loyalist to his father, to Solon Severian. So Solon Severian and Saurian are friends, but Saurian has grown old and he has lost a lot of speed. But in that speed, he has never stopped training. With that speed lost, he has gained durability and he has always been a hard hitter with a very short temper. So with that in mind, we know he wears heavy armor. He's got a very, very good stat line. Can't emphasize that enough. And his ability is Protect. If a general is on the field, redirect the first attack targeting them each round to Saurian. This will change. This is going to have a 3-turn cooldown, because having it in its current state where he can do this every turn is quite broken in a set that is made to protect Aster. Not to mention that blue cards in general can be grouped together, so even a card like King Isserin from Azurite could benefit too much from that. Alright, and then we can see his second ability is Unleashed Fury. This card, if this card takes 900 plus damage in a round, gain 350 damage for the next 2 turns. This can only activate once every 4 turns, but if you do the maths on that, it activates, then it has 2 turns, then it somewhat feels like a 2-turn cooldown and it's back. This is absolutely brutal. This is absolutely brutal, and it makes Saurian the type of card that you are going to have to status condition down. You are going to have to manage this card. It is a very strong card. It is one of the stronger cards when we look into the blue units which have been made already. But what that's predicated on is that it comes in, it takes the attack for Aster, the attack that was made for it, and all of a sudden, as an opponent, I don't want to damage it anymore. There's also a few self-damaging cards as well in the Blue Kingdom, so this can get out of control very fast. I do see Saurian being a card that We'll need some balance options around it, but for now we're going to leave it in its very powerful state just to see how the game flows while it's like this. So that's a card to protect Aster. He can protect Aster by taking an attack that was meant for him. Then we have Cassius. Cassius comes onto the board usually after the general, because when I enter the field, grant all allies when I enter, so not before that, grant all allies 10 speed for 1 turn, and if a general is on the battlefield, that general may use an extra item next turn. So if Aster is already on the field, he will get to potentially use 2 health potions the next turn, because he can use an extra item and he'd be able to heal himself for 300 health. Now, where this is a little bit of a disadvantage, I guess you could say, is that Aster would lock himself into using an item interaction. He wouldn't be able to move that turn or attack that turn or do anything else. But in terms of the game plan of surviving, that seems very viable. And the next ability that Cassius has is the target ally becomes immune to the next instance of damage, and if that unit is a general, add 300 health. So this can potentially get Aster's health to 1400, and it can also protect him from an instance of damage. So essentially a very strong, very broken card as well. Very different in terms of interaction than Saurian, but still very good at keeping the general alive. That's what these 2 cards are made for. The Azure Advisor and the Lion of Mistmere. Remember I mentioned Mistmere is that place where Isurin is from? Saurian is also from there, and he's called the Lion of Mistmere. We'll get into the lore in another video. I don't want this video to drag on. Let's get done with the general strategy. Naeem has a ability. She's basically got an aura that adds damage and health, which will help Aster, and she also can activate an ability that helps with movement options. So it can make all of the adjacent units move an extra square along the board. So Aster would, instead of only having these 2 movement options, he would be able, if Naeem is here, if Naeem is adjacent, as in next to him, he would be able to move here, and then the effects, the aura that she has would essentially break. So that's somewhat the kind of setup for a card like Aster. He's going to be very mobile, jumping around, running away from very strong attackers, and the game plan from the other side is, of course, bring this card to the front of the board and do not allow it to survive 5 or 6 turns, or however many turns it takes before it turns into Aster the Azure Prince, because once that switch happens, I promise you the interaction is insane. I think the current ability is called Crown Shatter Waltz, and Crown Shatter Waltz, it deals like 700 damage across the front row, the entire front row, and then if it kills anything, it deals it to the back row as well, and that's like 1 ability swing. It is absolutely insane. The stat line on that card as well is just unbeatable. It cannot be status conditioned. Don't allow it to happen. The whole point is for Aster to not be allowed to get to that point, because once he's in that state, it's Exodia. It's a sweep. Alright, maybe we should discuss Isurin's general strategy a bit, just because the blue cards have so many protection options. Isurin kind of functions in the same way as a general. He kind of also wants to be safe and protected. You can see he's a resonance type. We'll go over the magic system in another video, what resonance means, what projection type means, amplification, nullification, absorb types, what those are. But for the simplicity of this video, Isurin is a card that can chill in the front line as a general pretty well, because his ability is a passive and it allows him to do something cool. So he can deploy himself to the front row, get an attack off, and then when I am targeted, move me to the back line. So as soon as I'm targeted, move me to the back line and summon a Veil clone that taunts the opponent's strongest unit. So if, for example, Aster were to target Isserin, he would go to the back line, he would summon a Veil clone. Let's just get one of those Veil clones up in the cut. Alright, sick. He'd summon a Veil clone, and this Veil clone would taunt the strongest enemy unit. The strongest enemy unit would be Saurian, Lion of Mistmere, and Saurian would be forced this turn to attack this card, or next turn when he has his next action. On his next action, as long as this card is alive, he would be forced to attack it. And as you can see, when I die, deal 300 damage to the nearest front row enemy. That would be Saurian, but there can be an example. Let me just get rid of Varen. There is an example where Saurian is forced to attack this card, this Horned Veil clone. It explodes, and the nearest unit is not Saurian, it is Naeem, who would then be left with 1000 health instead of 1003 because it deals 300 damage to the nearest front row enemy. Alright, so that's somewhat the game plan for Isserin as well. He also has an ability called Coup d'Etat. We can see he can work with magic items that are blue or weapons that are blue, which makes him a very interesting kind of fighter. He targets an enemy next time they use an ability or trigger a passive, deal 250 magic damage to all units in the same row, and increase all of their ability cooldowns by 1. So a card like Isserin does synergize really well in that sense with Kest, because Kest has Veil Burn, and when units use abilities they suffer damage. So they suffer damage from this Coup d'Etat ability, then they suffer damage from this ability as well. And you know, if they're Veil Burned, they get really brutalized, and then their cooldowns go up. They're not able to respond with abilities, and it just snowballs out of control. So that's general commander strategy for both sides, and that's the world of Blackblade. I know that this turned into a very long video, but it had to be. I've tried to go over this as fast and as solid as possible, go over all of the really cool aspects of Blackblade. Let me know what you guys are thinking about it so far. Like I said, this is the dream game. This is what we're building, and I wanted to demo the game and show how much thought and love has gone into it. So far we've done around 40 something cards, maybe closer to 50 cards are complete and are ready for play. Each card already has its lore sorted out, as in where it fits in the world, what region, where the character's from, how they interact with all of the other characters, and the gameplay is as solid as all of these cards that are on the board right now. I know I wasn't able to show a lot of Varen, Naeem, or Serena Nocturna, but we'll get to showing those in other videos. Alright, this has been Blackblade. If you made it this far, thank you. You're a real one. Shout out to the real ones. And this is your boy, Loy, signing off. Peace.